Hi, my name is Klaus Scherwinski. This is a video walkthrough where I click through the steps and give some explanation how my partner, Luisa Preißler, and I painted this large Game Master screen illustration for a German role-playing game called The Dark Eye. Let's dive right in. If you know about role-playing games, you know what a Game Master screen is, and you know that this is a big illustration, and it doesn't only have to work as one big illustration, but it has to work as four different individual illustrations. Let me show you this. So each part of this big screen should work as one panel because the publisher would possibly like to use it as book covers, each individually as they are. So this group of three should work together, and even the guy on the far right here with some fiddling, some taking out some parts of the elf in the foreground there, this should work as an individual illustration. Another point is that when you stand up this Game Master screen, it will fold around, and not all four panels of this quadriptych, that's the smart word for it, not all four panels will be visible at the same time, so they should all work individually and still look good. And as a whole, indeed, they also have to work, so it's really tricky to get the focus right on these illustration or on this illustration. Indeed, we start with a sketch. Sketch looks lousy like this, and there have been several more of these before this sketch, but we decided for this one. You can already notice that there are some changes that have happened from this step to the final illustration. For example, the metal gate on the right-hand side is no longer in that position, and I indeed corrected posing of several characters, which is again the next step. When we think this is cool, then we create a clean line art version. This again took several hours getting this line art version the right way. This was completely done in Photoshop so far because we can work in layers and we can easily move elements around. When I see that the elf has to go a little bit more to the middle, I can still move him around. If I do this on paper, this is indeed much harder to make that happen. This now is the version that we handed off to the client, because when we send it to the client, we will already want to establish that there is atmosphere going on and we want to see a little bit what's happening in there. So I imported this actually to my iPad and used Procreate and an Apple Pencil to get this nice pencil shading technique going. I just want to try it out and see how it works, and it gives it a nicer, more physically rendered style, which is always more agreeable to the human eye than seeing something that is completely graphic, completely done with a computer. First step that Luisa tackled was the color block-in, establishing the primary colors for the walls, for some light sources. You can see on the left-hand side that we went with a green magical spell because we wanted to have the old mage do a lighting spell. There were several ways how we wanted to bring light into this illustration, and one was doing a light spell, another was having a torch which the elf is holding, and another one again is bringing some moonlight from outside sources because they are in a dungeon and they are downstairs and we still want to have some light come in. As we explained in the article of ImagineFX magazine, we started with the faces, or that is, Luisa started with the faces, because we want to make sure that the faces look good, especially for the main characters in our Game Master screen, the ones that are looking straight at us and that are shown in the biggest way. We want to have those faces look good, so that's where we start with. Then we had some chainmail and some armor, for example, here on the side. And now things get tricky because rendering chainmail can be done in a million ways. Getting reference is the first step indeed, as usually. But here we, for example, found out there's a graphic pattern that we could look at from afar. Actually, it looks kind of convincing. But it only looks convincing from afar. It didn't look convincing from closer up. So we went in and tried to improve that. Also, as you can see, we changed the curvature of the chainmail here to have it more from below, because we're actually when we look at it closely, we are looking at these characters at this scene from a very low angle. We have a horizon line that is in the lower fifth of this illustration, so it's pretty low. Our eyes are pretty low, so we're looking up to the characters. This was too strong, however. So again, we went in and revised that to make it look better. Now we have added some bats in the left side. On the left side, we can still see the green from the original color block in that Luisa did in there a little bit. It's turned a little bit more yellow now, but we have to continue and fix that chainmail and add some overall lighting, and that's what we're doing in this next step here. You can see that we had a large impact by changing the overall lighting scheme. This has happened on another layer. However, in this illustration, mostly digital painters use layers to fix the entire lighting schemes, so it affects everything that is there. But our problem here is that we are swapping the file back and forth. Sometimes Luisa works on it, sometimes I work on it, and she works on this part, I work on a different part, and later on we just put it together in one file. But the overall lighting fix-up we did here affects everything that is beneath it. So we had to keep this on a separate layer or in a separate layer folder, and then turn it off, and then work under it. And when we want to see how it actually turned out and looks in this lighting setup that we have now, we need to turn it back on and check and go back and forth. It's tedious, but it's the best way to do it while still maintaining a versatility in moving elements around, which is really important. As you can see, the chainmail is now fixed. It looks cool. It looks cool from close-up, and it looks cool from afar. Some more rendering has happened here on the faces and the lighting, and we can now move around the pictures, and everybody tackles different parts of the image. Here we tackle the Knight Inquisitor now, which is this guy here on the far right, and we're going to give him a really nice plate armor for a different touch. You can see it right here. We can zoom in a little bit more, and we see it's a really neat and nice and tidy and clean armor with very tight lines, and indeed we can't leave it at that. We need to show a little bit of battle damage and some blemish on the armor, and all those lines here look really super tight and super digital and super unnatural. It can't be tight everywhere over the figure and in the picture, so we have to work on that. So we turn off the lighting scheme and work under it, and you can see that I've added some more creases in the clothes here, and some scratches on the armor and some battle damage, and we corrected all the edges. That makes it just more natural and just more painterly, and that's the look we want to have with this image. Who's next? One of the next character we tackled is the Grom. This guy here in the back is a Grom. It's not a dwarf, it's not a halfling, it's a Grom. It has a big head and a tiny 8-year-old kid body, and it's a grown-up person, and he lowers himself down from up there to descend into the dungeons. Next thing, the elf, or actually the half-elf bard. If you look at this guy going like, oh, he's not skinny enough for an elf. Yeah, he's a half-elf. These characters were not invented by us. They were not designed by us. They were provided to us, the illustrators, because they were backer characters from a Kickstarter campaign, and some actual role-playing gamers had their characters immortalized in this illustration. It was indeed our pleasure to do this, but we had to match them together and fit them into a little story that is happening here. And this is what's going on. The elf has heard a sound, and oh my god, he's looking in a different direction. So a lot of things have happened here. Looking at this again. You see the other elf, the Wind Rider elf in the background, has also received more rendering. And in the next step, we go to the left. We turn off the lights again, and we go to the left and check out what the old mage is doing back here. We have him there in the image with a lighting spell, and Luisa has started painting the face and laying down the first colors for this couple here. The next step, we can see that the Amazon's hat is added. looks really spiffy, looks really nice. We have to be careful as to not render too much of the other stuff, because we want to have focus by rendering on the most important things, and that is mostly the face. Next step is getting the lighting back on and getting more depth into the picture in total. So that also means that we have to take the light sources into account. The torch of the elf, of the half-elf bard, will indeed create light, and that light actually hides the other elf that is behind him. So he has to be obscured more. If we look into the version before, you can see the entire leg. Everything is still nicely green, or whatever leather that is there, and then it's obscured by the light. And this is getting the torch right, getting those details right. We also go back and forth with the outer border here, the border ornaments that are nicely tying this image together. But we have to see like how things interact with the borders, so we don't have bad tangents or other things that are cut off at awkward places. We don't want that. Now let's focus on the light spell here. It looks really cool. The bats are still on a different layer indeed, and they're just like placeholders at this very moment, and they don't have the energy yet or the rendering quality that we want to have there. The problem though is that this light from the hand here distracts too much. It is much more powerful than the faces that are being lit here. It's much more powerful than the torch in the middle of the picture. And while it just has to work as its own individual little picture here, the part on the left, we still want to make sure that that it doesn't overpower the rest of what we see there. So we have to get the light spell right. So let's check out what we have here. First of all, indeed, it's nice if we actually get rid of the borders and all the other little effects that distract us from what's actually happening in this picture. And we can take a look at the light spell in here. Indeed, light always reveals more things, but you can also use light to hide elements and hide details. And this is something what we want to do here. We want to hide some details, and we want to create more depth in our image in total, which is the interesting part here. Often details are not as interesting as depth. If you have depth in your picture, that's really important. If you have depth and volume, that really helps. Getting a million details into your picture, that's another thing. In general, there are two approaches to doing a color or a lighting effect. One is indeed the age-old way of just using color dodge tool and going into reducing everything to one layer and then just going over it several times and making everything burn, like burning away details and getting more glare and getting more highlights going in the picture, which is a great, fast way of making things pop, if that is your intention. Our intention, however, is to make things more subtle and approach it more from a actually painting perspective. So we want to do something different here. And the way I've approached this is by just using a very simple method. Opening a new layer over it, and I'm using a gradient. I'm using a round gradient here from the center. And I'm going into my layer. It's on 100% right now, which is much too strong. I should use a lower power on this here, lower opacity as it is, and then do a radial gradient up here, and we're getting some effect. Oh, that didn't work out indeed because I clicked the wrong one. Going back now. Now, this is normally how it happens, especially if you do everything in one take like I'm doing right now. So let's again go with the right gradient and throw in the orange here. And we already see that stuff is still getting more light. It's getting more intense, but also details are being hidden right now. So you can also, like, if you want, use a different color of gradient and obscure it even more, get more going between it. Now we indeed have to cut it out because this light wouldn't get here into the foreground of this pillar and definitely not this side pillar here. So what I'm doing right now, I'm activating a layer mask that I pre-prepared for this little thing here. And boom, there we have it. Now, the only thing we have to do is adjust the colors. Is maybe too orange, too intensive. But the cool thing is that we get more depth into the picture, and we don't actually do more rendering. We don't actually do more white highlights. We have to avoid the solid white points in this image here. So let's check it out how it looked when we did it. And this is what we did there. We added the bats back at the very end. And you can see the light spell is not as intensive yellow as I just did it. So this needs a little bit of fiddling, of experience on your part, getting somebody else, in my part, Luisa indeed, looking over this image and seeing, okay, this has too much value in there, or this has too much color in there, and adjust that accordingly, sprinkling in some nice magical effects. That's a nice extra touch, but it didn't necessitate that we do more rendering on other parts. We didn't render solid white highlights on things that are not in the focus area. And this concludes it. This is actually the final version of our file. If you want to see what this Game Master screen illustration looks like in real life, I have a little thing here for you. This is actually the product, how it's used on the table while it's standing up. You can see how all those 4 panels have to work together, but also have to work individually. The client has also used the one part of the screen of our illustration as a cover for a little booklet that came with the Game Master screen. So now you know how the entire process went on from first sketch to final product. And I will leave you with this. Thank you for listening to my ramblings, trying to explain some aspects of this illustration and what we thought while we were doing it. Talking about Luisa Preißler has another video online. It's also from ImagineFX, and it's called Paint Dramatic Light and Shadows. It's from ImagineFX magazine 158. And you can find that online if you want to see an actual time-lapse painting of a wonderful portrait of a female assassin. Then that will be something for you. But until then, I'll leave you. See you in real life. Keep on painting, keep on drawing, and talk to you next time. Thanks for watching.